Hi everybody, my name is Ryan Callahan. I made this video on behalf of myself and others who have been subjected to long-term isolation in cold, dark prison cells. The things that we face when we're forced to reintegrate back into society are difficult for us. And I think that it's important for the community to know that, and that's why I made this video. This video is called The Philosophy of Reintegration, and I wrote it. Being removed from society and placed into a cold, dark prison cell changes a person forever. The same reason that humans take certain precautions when placing wild animals into captivity, such as covering their faces and simulating a wild environment, are the same reasons why prison, which does not take certain precautions to simulate society, causes a captive inmate to lose his societal survival skills. Human beings are adaptive, and so when we're taken from our families, employers, homes, and placed into a cage, we begin to adapt to prison life. Prison is a place where people are unable to have sex, unable to eat healthy food, and forced to associate with evil people. We're taken away from our children and our spouses, and we're provided with meals even when we don't work to earn food. We're abused, dehumanized, and treated with an extreme coldness and malice that can only be experienced in prison. Our minds become altered by our captivity, and we naturally adapt. We develop a complete distrust for law enforcement and government. We're forced to become sneaky because when we request anything, we're often denied. Often people cannot handle the stress, and so they go to the doctors, if you really want to call them doctors, and they're prescribed medications to cope. They become dependent upon these medications. The meds are usually low quality and prescribed by an unprofessional and negligent doctor, who often takes 10 minutes at most to hear a lifetime of pain from a person before prescribing them a pill that will fix everything. The inmate is often subjected to solitary confinement, which has been proven to cause severe psychological problems such as auditory and visual hallucinations. He's forced to fight other inmates in order to survive. Being locked in prison with men who will try to steal from you, kill you, take from you, and use you causes you to be hard, and your face changes into one of a man who has seen some things. You're away from everyone who loves you, and you're locked up with people full of hatred and rage. And as your release date approaches, you're met with a group of people who hold the title as discharge planners. They're overworked, overexerted, and unqualified. They lack resources, they lack motivation. Their caseload usually consists of child molesters, killers, gang members, drug addicts, and their carelessness reflects their opinions. Their carelessness reflects the amount of effort they put into their work and the quality of work that they put in. And we're released back into a society unfamiliar to our adapted selves. We carry a paranoia, distrust, anger, and aggression into the community. The community is vulnerable to the inmate who, up until this point, has been restricted, and he now sees women everywhere and food and stores easily capable of taking. His kids are now part of his life, and his parenting skills have been stolen from him. He's been around hardcore gangsters and killers and sex offenders, and he's developed this hardness about him that takes away from the softness necessary to be a good father. Similarly, if certain precautions were overlooked when temporarily capturing wild animals, when released back into the wild, would no longer be capable of surviving. Once a person becomes adapted to prison life, he loses communication skills and coping skills required to thrive in society. He has a look of steel and an iciness about himself which, although necessary in prison, proves to be lethal to his ability to serve as an employee, or to secure employment. His interview causes him to feel severe anxiety, and he carries an awkwardness about himself. He's a pariah. And he's found himself unable to cope, and he begins to take on the characteristics of someone with post-incarceration syndrome, or PICS. He's mean and unstable, and he begins to realize that prison is where he belongs. He's institutionalized. And so he reemerges back into a changed society, transformed. And while it may be true that he has learned a valuable lesson not to break whatever law he broke, which landed him in prison, his new reality he soon finds presents him with a more complicated problem, and the solution will take time and diligence. He must survive, and he realizes that he doesn't have time, and that everything seems to pile up, and he becomes overwhelmed, and he finds himself hungry, a hunger he never felt when he was in prison because food was provided to him. He also needs shelter, clothing, and transportation. He has bills and he needs to work, but 10 years in prison has caused him to lose contact with employers. He begins to experience a sense of an instinctual necessity to survive. People view him as a hostile man. Many people avoid him. He appears aggressive. He needs help, but nobody helps him. They tell him to just relax, things will be fine, one step at a time, slow motion. He's cold because nighttime comes, and he's hungry, and he begins to put morale on a back burner. He's unable to make it to his appointments because nobody wants to help him, nobody will give him a ride. And his mental health, having deteriorated, leads him to self-medicate. And so he drinks alcohol because alcohol is on every street corner. There's liquor stores and bars everywhere. And so he drinks alcohol. And the liquor brings him to a fearlessness of consequences, a fearlessness of injury, a fearlessness of result. He views himself as an outcast, and in his pariety, he steals. At first, he just steals food, but food turns into property and shoplifting, and people just leave things on the shelf, easily accessible for any hungry man. And before too long, he's immersed deeply into crime. Incarceration, addiction, and time goes on, and he grows old. And he dies as an old man who spent his life in and out of prison, on and off the streets. A painful life. My life.